Hi there, everybody. Thanks for joining. Grace, are you on?
Yes, I am on. Thank you,
Awesome.
everyone.
Let's start up.
Awesome. Welcome to this presentation for Student Disability Service, also known as SDS. My name is Grace, an Access Consultant at SDS, and today we will provide you with an overview and introduction to Student Disability Services at the University of Iowa. With me today are two of my colleagues, David and Hannah, who are both Access Consultants as well. Our office is located at 141 University Capital Center across from Raising Cane's. Today's itinerary: staff introductions, student disability services, mission, vision, and role on campus, accommodation differences between K-12, high school, and the college, application process for requesting accommodations, including how to apply, supporting documentation needed, and initial meeting. Common accommodations utilized in confidentiality, additional resources, and then we'll have time for some questions at the end. Our, off our office is led by our director, Mike, who is seen on the left, and assistant director, Vicky, on the right. Our staff access consultants include David, he's our access consultant and media services lead, Hannah, access consultant and exam services lead, Brett, Access Consultant and Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services Lead, and Grace, myself, Access Consultant. Now, let's review the mission and vision of Student Disability Services. Our mission: Student Disability Services, SDS, at the University of Iowa actively supports students with disabilities. We collaborate with students, faculty, and staff to deliver academic accommodations and create a welcoming educational environment. Our mission is to empower students to succeed and thrive at the University of Iowa. Our vision: Student Disability Services envisions a University of Iowa where students with disabilities feel supported, included, and able to thrive in and out of the classroom. Student Disability Services exists to bridge the accessibility gap in the classroom. This could be by working with instructors to help create accessible materials or universal design in the classroom. We strive to ensure a fair learning environment where students are able to succeed based on their own efforts and initiatives, and we take pride in the academic and personal achievements for over 2,000 students. Through our accommodation process, we affirm the worth of each individual and encourage self-advocacy while providing referrals as needed. You will notice some differences between accommodations in high school and college. The first one here: in high school, it is the responsibility of the school system to identify students with disabilities and provide accommodations, whereas in college, it is the responsibility of the student to provide documentation of disability or condition to disability services. In high school, an IEP in 504 expires after high school. Another difference between high school and college: family in high school, family may be actively involved in the educational experience and have access to records. Here in college, family involvement is limited due to FERPA. And lastly, in high school, there is an annual review of IEPs or 504 plans, whereas in college, an annual review of student accommodations is not required. The Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act is a federal law that protects the privacy of student education records. The law applies to all schools that receive funds under an applicable program of the U.S. Department of Education. More on FERPA later.
Thanks, Grace. It's David here, and now let's provide a quick review of accommodations and the accommodations process, including how to apply, supporting documentation, student initial meeting with one of us as the Access Consultants, and accessing your letters of accommodation, also known as the LOA. So to apply for accommodations, students first will need to complete the SDS application. You can find that on the SDS website. This application contains two questions. The first question is to describe disability and how it impacts your academics. And the second question is, what accommodations are you requesting, or what could be helpful? This could be accommodations that you've had listed on a previous 504 plan or IEP, or other accommodations that you think may be helpful. The application also allows you to upload supporting documentation in PDF for us to review. After submitting both your application and your documentation, you'll want to monitor your UIWA email account for updates, and that process can take anywhere from about 2 to 3 weeks. So we recommend that you apply early to get that process going. When you open the application on our website, here's what it would look like. It's kind of small on the screen, but you'll have the two questions and then where to upload. It's best if you can for the student to uh, answer the two questions that are provided there, um, so that we can see in your wording how you feel about this application. So here's documentation. Cover some of the things here on the slide that says when you're reviewing a documentation for accommodation eligibility, what our office is looking for is it identifies the disabling condition for which accommodations are being requested, provides by appropriately licensed professional. That documentation comes to us from an appropriately licensed professional. It's dated. However, signatures are not required in the documentation. So we have a space on our website where it has the documentation guidelines. You can review this and more if you need more information about documentation. Just as another note on the documentation, that could be coming from as a reference point, your 504 or your IEP plan. That could be helpful for us to reference as well if you wanted to include that and see what type of accommodations that you've been using or have been successfully using. Let's talk about the initial student meeting with your Access consultant. So as I mentioned, people on the call here, Grace, myself, and Hannah are all Access consultants. We have another Access consultant, not on the call, Brett, but on our website page, it describes what you can expect in an initial meeting with your Access consultant. It's a brief overview where we can give you a short orientation, similar to what we're talking about in this particular webinar. We'll also talk about the interactive process and how we can support the student. Interactive process is just working one-to-one with the student to see what their individual needs are. And then we go over the student's rights and responsibilities. We discuss their specific accommodations in detail. And then we also guide them through the process in the student portal on how they can access their letters of accommodation. And that's in My UI. And then if there's any questions, we can answer those as well. The way that you would generate your LOAs, as I mentioned in My UI, you would go to generate them each semester. Remember, these are the letters of accommodation that you would share with your instructors. And then we recommend that you meet with your instructors to discuss your individual accommodations as well, so that they can implement those in your courses. And of course, we're always around. If you needed to reach out to your Access consultant, you could, and ask any questions in that process as well. So as I mentioned, we'll guide you on how to access these letters and generate these letters in My UI to share with your instructors. You'll need to share the LOAs with your instructors, and remember, it's your responsibility as a student to do so. So that's kind of the difference between the K-12 system and here in college, is that you have access to those LOAs and then you share them with your instructors to let them know that you have eligible for accommodations. And we're also going to encourage you to engage in the interactive process by sending those LOAs out and communicating with your instructors. You will meet with your instructors to discuss how the accommodations will be implemented once those are established with the letters of accommodation. You'll need to do that for each class and each section as you're looking for your accommodations for that section of the class. What I mean by sections is if you have the lecture course, then you'll also be generating your letters for discussion periods too. Really, you only need to talk to the key instructor, the faculty, and then they'll share that with the whole educational or the instruction team rather on what type of accommodations that you have.
David, it looks like we've got a question for you. So someone asked, do I need to contact my professor before the semester starts?
The timing of that is, yeah, that we encourage you to do that sometime either right before the semester starts or even in the first week. You just don't want to go too long into the semester where you haven't made that contact. Um, so depending on the circumstances, you usually can have that time in before. A good cue for you might be is if you get a welcome email from an instructor sent to your University of Iowa email that says the course module is open and that the syllabus is ready for you to review, and they remind you that you're going to be meeting at your next class and where the location is and the time. That might be a good indication for you to go ahead and turn around and send that email uh, with your letter of accommodation by attaching that letter to the email and sending it on to your instructor. Just don't send it out to the entire class. Don't reply to all. You just want to send it just to the instructor. So you can have that one-to-one connection there. Thanks, Hannah.
Yeah, I just thought I would read that one since it was relevant during that section.
Appreciate it.
So some common accommodations. We thought we'd go over them in this section in case anyone was wondering. So we've got a list here. I'll go through each one of them and talk a little bit about each one. So some common accommodations. First is the class notes accommodation. This is notes that could be received from a student in class. Usually these are anonymous. So whoever takes them in class will send them to the instructor, and then the instructor will give them out to anyone that needs them. There's 4 different ways that you could get them. The access consultant will go over it in that initial meeting to talk about the 4 different options, and then you would talk with the instructor to figure out what works best for you. Allow audio recording of class would allow you to record in class yourself. Most students use their phone, but you could also use your computer, or if you have a specific audio recording device, that can be helpful. Extended time on exams for quizzes or exams and or quizzes. So for this one, it's typically 50% extended time, but we can always talk about adding additional time if that is not sufficient. This one and the reduced distraction environment would allow students to test at one of our campus testing centers. We've got 2 testing centers that students may go to depending on where their accommodations can be met. Otherwise, these can also be provided by the instructors themselves. The reduced distraction environment just has to be someplace pretty quiet. It doesn't have to, we don't have a requirement of a certain number of people, but we do ask that it be not as distracting as the classroom. So no one talking or no printers or phones ringing, things like that. Otherwise, our disability related absence and deadline modification, or DRATM, this accommodation would cover extensions on assignments, extra absences, and making up exams and quizzes. So for this one, instructors and students would sit down together and they would go through the interactive process to create a plan that works for them for that class. So this accommodation, along with the deadline modification, that's the next on the list, are really helpful for individuals with chronic health conditions. Deadline modification is also part of the DRATM, but we also provide it for students who maybe don't want the absence portion and just want the extensions on assignments. We also provide deaf and hard of hearing services. So this could be captioned media, it could be CART or communication access real-time translation. So that would be captions during class, or even sign language interpreters if that is the preferred communication method for students. And then e-text for required textbooks is also another common accommodation. So this one would be a textbook that would be provided as a PDF, and then students would be able to utilize a text-to-speech reader to have that textbook read out loud for them. So, and there are other accommodations too. These are just some of the more common ones that we wanted to go over today. I know Grace touched briefly on confidentiality. So information related to students' disabilities is not shared with instructors. Diagnoses will not be in LOAs. It's up to the instructor, or sorry, it's up to the student if they would like to disclose any disabilities. It is really up to them. They do not have to. And then family members or members of student support systems can be a part of the accommodation process with the student signed consent. So we have a consent form that students can fill out. It is separate from the normal consent form through the university. We have a question, would I have to pay for the e-textbook? So for that one, students would purchase the textbook as normal, and then they'd send confirmation that they've purchased it to our media services team, and then they would work with that team to get it, so they wouldn't have to pay anything additional. Otherwise, back to the confidentiality page. Um, I think we may have covered that actually. If the consent form is needed, they can reach out to their access consultant. Otherwise, additional resources, and then I'll get to the last questions as well. So we've got the Academic Life Navigator program. This one is a holistic program within SDS. It's designed to be a resource for students with autism spectrum disorder and or ADHD. It helps them to achieve all they can at University of Iowa. They would be able to meet with one of our ALNs. We've got 3 coming in for the fall, which is exciting. And they would work with them on communication skills, social skills, goal setting, problem solving, executive functioning, organizational skills, any of the areas listed below. And the graduate students are in the rehab counseling program, so they are working with students in the field once they graduate. So it's a good experience for them to also get more experience working with students. Otherwise, other campus resources would be housing and dining. So they provide accommodations for dorm rooms, any housing accommodations needed, and dining accommodations. Otherwise, the Parking and Transportation Office provides parking accommodations, and Bionic Bus can be helpful. That is a service that you would register for. They would review the application. I think it takes 21 days, and then once that's approved, um, the service would be provided. You can also use the service while they're processing the request. And what they do door-to-door service. So if students need more transportation on campus, they could be a good office. Otherwise, university counseling and student health are great for counseling for the counseling office, and then student health provides similar to what a primary care would provide. So they can also be good resources. Otherwise, I can take any additional questions. I'll answer one that is in the chat. So someone writes, does SDS provide services for social emotional support for students with ASD, so autism spectrum disorder, who are also transfer students and transitioning to Iowa, especially during the On Iowa week? Certain events can be overwhelming. That is true. So we do offer our Academic Life Navigator program, which could be a good resource for students with autism spectrum disorder. Otherwise, we would typically refer to counseling. If they need counseling services, they can always reach out to student health. Otherwise, orientation has other resources for getting used to the campus. And students, once they're approved for accommodations, can always reach out to their access consultant as well if they need additional support with accommodations. Someone writes, who will determine what your accommodations will be? That's a great question. So once students apply for accommodations through our office, one of our supervisors will approve accommodations, and then we will meet with them or the student, I should say, to talk through what they've been approved for. At that time, we can always put in a request for any additional accommodations. So sometimes there are additional barriers that come up or additional things that students would like to request, depending on kind of how their semester is going. You can always request new accommodations at any point. So we can always
always add to the accommodation list. It's not set in stone. Otherwise, um, will the access coordinator make suggestions for accommodations? So we really base it on what the need is. So in that meeting, we'll talk through what we've already approved for you based on what you've expressed need in the application. And then if you share any additional barriers in the initial meeting, we can always talk to you about possible suggestions or other accommodations that might be needed that can help with that barrier as well. Someone writes, following up with that, do you want to see their high school accommodations or what they received at other colleges? Yes. If they have any other accommodations that they've received elsewhere, that can be helpful for us to see so that we can see what might be helpful for us as well. Otherwise, documentation, as David shared, could also be um, from a provider. It has to list a diagnosis. Um, so if it is something from a provider or from a high school, it does have to also list an accommodate or a diagnosis. Any other questions?
This is Grace, Hannah. I just answered a question in the chat that we see kind of frequently. Somebody had asked if they have to apply for accommodations each semester. And no, you don't have to. Your accommodations will actually follow you throughout each semester and your time here at UI. But if you would like to make changes or see if you're able to apply for additional accommodations or you'd like to remove an accommodation, then you could schedule a consult meeting with your access consultant in my UI or email SDS info or call our office.
I don't know if it was addressed that one person said that they had had their application in for a while.
Yes, I just responded to that.
Okay, gotcha.
Yes, we've got a lot of applications coming in right now, so it's taking us a little bit longer to process them, but we will get to all of them as soon as possible.
Yeah, just keep an eye on your University of Iowa email. That's the one to check on.
And to answer the next question that came in, when you generate your letter of accommodation, you'll be able to pick and choose which classes you'd like to accommodate or receive, um, like which classes you'd like to receive which accommodations for. So if you have one class that you would like to receive accommodations for and not others, you can decide at that time, so you don't have to generate the same letter for every class. Yes, it is correct that the only way your professors will know you have accommodations is by you telling them. When you generate a letter of accommodation, it will send them an email to say that you've generated that letter, but it will not send the letter, so you will have to send it yourself. Students can decide, just reading the next question that says, will students determine if they need an ALN with access consultant during initial meeting? The access consultant can certainly share that information with the student, and if they would like to apply for that or fill out the interest form for that, they are more than welcome to. Can you use the same letter with each new semester if there are no changes? That is a good question. No, you cannot. So you have to generate a new letter each semester. Um, and we do that because that will allow you to, in our scheduling tool for exams, it'll allow you to get scheduled. They won't be in the system if you don't generate a letter, along with other accommodations as well. You have to have it in the system for us to process it with your instructors.
I could just add on that too. It's multiple letters. It's like there's a letter for each individual course, and it's based on a template. So you choose the accommodations for the individual course, and it prints out the letter for you each time. But it's also doing a number of other things, as Hannah mentioned. It's like getting the system arranged on your accommodations in the background.
Yes, and for the question on the world language requirement, we do have an accommodation for a substitution that you can talk about with your access consultant. So that is on a case-by-case basis.
I see someone in the chat also asked a question. Can the student apply for accommodations if they haven't yet registered for classes? So it is very helpful for the student to have registered for classes and met with their academic advisor. But they are able to, correct me if I'm wrong, Hannah or David, they could submit their documentation and schedule like a meeting with us to discuss what accommodations they might be seeking, but it would be most helpful if they'd already registered for classes and have their schedule.
Yes, students can apply at any time, but they'll need to be registered for classes before they can have their initial meeting. And you can meet with us in person or over Zoom, so either is fine. Um, Someone asked, how does a meeting with instructors typically go? Um, I think usually when students sit down with them, they just explain, hey, here are my accommodations. How should we go about this? Where will I test? How will I get my notes or whatnot? They usually don't take very long unless you have the DRADM accommodation or deadline modification, in which case you have to create a plan on how that will be used. That one takes a little bit longer. If students are worried about it, they can always talk with their access consultant and we can do like a mock conversation or we can talk through it or we could even sit in on your first meeting with your instructor. So a few different options for that. Um, we had a question how to best coordinate medical support through the school. That really depends on what type of support you're looking for. If it's counseling, we recommend university counseling services. Otherwise, they also have a counseling referral list for in for providers in the area. If it's healthcare, you could utilize University of Iowa Health Services. There's also the University of Iowa healthcare system um, that is also a good system. I guess I would recommend one of those. Any other questions? It looks like Grace is typing.
We're not answering the question completely today. It might be something that needs a little bit more individual to address it individually. You're welcome to contact our office and we can set up a time to speak to your individual needs. That
Yes.
that also that also goes for if you're just not willing, you are not wanting to talk about it over the webinar. That's fine. We can set up a time.
Any other questions? We've had a lot of great questions. This is amazing. And again, if anyone does have questions that they think of later, you can always reach out to us over email at sds-info@uiowa.edu, or you can call our office as well. Okay, maybe one more minute for questions. If you've got one, send it back in and then we will wrap up. Okay, we've got a couple actually. So someone says, will my access consultant have access to my schedule to help me determine what I may or may not need? They will have access to your schedule. They'll talk with you to figure out kind of yes, essentially, they will help to talk with you about what you might or might not need. Um, and it might change depending on the semester if you're taking different classes. So that's why it's helpful to be able to request new accommodations as needed.
Also,
Someone is, sorry, go ahead.
just gonna add on that. Also, might could be good to look at it the opposite way, is that accommodations are for all classes. So we're going to do the best we can to facilitate the accommodations that can be implemented in all types of classes. So rather than the other way around, like what type of classes would, but since you do get to choose the individual accommodations, that'll be something that you develop a skill set that you have. Sometimes it's not applicable, for example, to choose an exam accommodation if there are no exams in the course. So if it's like a all papers and projects course, then you wouldn't necessarily have to ask for extra time on an exam. So you'll get a good sense of that starting with your access consultant, but then also develop the ability to determine that on your own as well.
Someone in the chat had asked a question. So steps are keep an eye on email for meeting date. Where does the LOA come from? might have missed this. So the first step would be to apply to register for accommodations with our office. And then there will be a 2 to 3 week period of review. It might be a little longer now as we're getting lots of accommodations. And then once you have been approved, you'll get an email to meet, to schedule an initial meeting with your access consultant. And that's going to come to your University of Iowa student email. And in there, you'll schedule an appointment. And then during the initial meeting, we will discuss how you will find your letters of accommodation and how you're going to generate those. So that's a process that we'll walk through during your initial meeting. But that information, if you forget after your initial meeting or are confused, those steps are also on the website as well.
Okay, 30 seconds for questions and then we'll wrap up. Okay, someone asks, if a student has an accommodation that has worked well for them in the past, either in high school or college, do we always use those? Um, we do sometimes. It really depends. Not all accommodations from high school are relevant in college. Okay, great. If anyone has any questions after this, again, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time today.